Hey everyone, I'm going to launch into the video in just a second, but basically this particular presentation was part of a workshop in Auckland in November 2014, and it wasn't really around showing people how to do things. It was more around giving them awareness and ideas around what you can do once you develop some capability with Excel. And really the point I was trying to make is that if you get a bit of knowledge, you can suddenly have ideas, ask questions, and even get other people to help you. And so you don't always have to do things yourself. Here are some go-to things that I believe are essential for being able to build projects such as the one we've already looked at and the one we're going to look at today. Here are the projects that were part of the workshop. We've covered number 2 already. That was actually video 1, but we've covered that already. What we're looking at today is project 1 up at the top. And the real key for it, I believe, is having a good solid data layout with really good descriptors and reference and lookups inside your file. The final thing really is around establishing almost like a code of conduct for yourself for building such things, where you always have as your first protocol a good data layout. You set up your lists nicely in a control panel page or something similar, and that you use a combination of methods to get your endpoints. So you may have pivot tables looking at ad hoc reporting, but fixed reporting can be done with some nicely formatted custom reports, and to do those you'll need to write some formula and make some dynamic charts, or do some clever stuff with a little bit more care and attention. Final point, really just to make some notes all the way through so that you can explain your own decisions either for someone else or for yourself later when you come to look at it. It's quite easy to forget how you did something and why, so these notes can be quite invaluable at a later date. Okay, on with the show.
Hey everyone, this is video number 2 from the AUT SPRINZ workshop held in November 2014. So the first project that I posted a week ago had a 45-minute demo of a wellness monitoring tool. This particular project is around the presentation and management of fitness testing data. So what we have here is a file that has 2 sheets in it currently. One sheet is a database page, and the other one has a few lists on it, which we will look at in a second, just some player names and so on. But if we go to the page that's called physical database, there is a whole lot of rows and columns of data, and what is very important, as you may have heard me say before, is that you have an organized layout. And so at the top of this data set, row 1, we have unique column headings, and they're very descriptive and very simple. And underneath all of those is rows of data, and this happens to have about, I think, 25 athletes for about 15 or 16 different data sets. So the first step, and something that I believe in very strongly now, this is Excel 2013 by the way, is to click on the Insert tab and choose Table. And so Excel will take a guess at what your table is. I'm going to say OK, and it'll apply some formatting. You can put a different style on that, such as this if you choose to, but ultimately the fact that it's now a table is very important. Up the top here in the corner you can see it's just used a default name, which is called Table 1, but I'm just going to call that TBL data. And that's very useful when you have a sheet with multiple tables on it. So to know exactly what your table name is helpful. And I always use a prefix TBL at the beginning, as you'll see when we write some formulas. Okay, so now we are ready to do one particular thing, and that is we can start building a report with pivot tables. After we do that, we'll do some with formula, but for now we'll just focus on the pivot table part. So with a cell selected inside the table, I click Insert, Pivot Table. A little wizard appears, and that wizard asks me, have I selected the correct data? Yes, I have. It's from TBL data. I want to create a new worksheet and I'm going to give that a name. Just going to call it player pivot because we'll do one for a team as well. The first one I want to do is the simplest one. We'll do one a little bit more like a dashboard shortly, but the first thing I want to do is I want to, over on the right hand side here, let me just bring it in here so it's easy to play with. I'm going to choose name and put it in the filter area. So that's how pivot tables work. You've got 4 quadrants and you build your table based upon dragging fields into these different areas. So I'm going to put name at the top. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some particular measures. Let's say body weight, sum of 8 skin folds, yo-yo distance, MAS. I'm just going to choose a couple more. Speed 10 meters, speed 40 meters, and just for good luck, one more. We'll choose mid-thigh pull. Okay. Just drag this back out to the side for a second. So what it's done is do a sum of all scores for all athletes, which isn't even remotely what I want, but it's starting to build things for us. I'm going to, from the field list, I'm going to drag date into the columns, and this thing that says sum of values I'm going to put down into the rows. I'm just going to close this field wizard for myself now. 2 things I want to do. The first one is I want to pick an individual athlete. And the second thing I want to do is I want to limit my selections. Instead of, these are all of the fitness test periods where this particular athlete has some data. I don't want that. That's far too busy. I'm just going to select the last 2, plus I'm just going to randomly choose one here because that might be a scenario when they were in great shape. Let's say that was just after the Olympics, and we can use that as a reference point. And just to tidy up this table, I'm going to use the context specific menu that only appears when you're inside a pivot table. So this context menu says design and analyze. It's got pivot table tools as a little subheading. I want to get rid of that grand total, which is currently column E, so I'm going to turn that off. And so basically what this is doing, and I do need to fix this up, is showing the test results for a particular time period with ultimate flexibility as to what you include in that table. So you can pick any of the available time series and it's just going to put them in a grid for you. Obviously I'd tidy up some of these things such as the decimal places on MAS, and you might decide you want to change from a sum to an average in case they were tested more than once inside a particular testing window. So let's say I want to do that. Bring back the field list, and I'm going to go into body weight. I'm going to go to value field settings and I'm going to change it to average. I'm also going to change the format to numbers, and while I'm there I'm going to do that for MAS as well, because that's the one that's giving us those unpleasant number decimal places. Cool. I'm going to close that off again. So I've now got a simple little tool that allows me to quickly look at change between various time periods inside a pivot table. And the key to making this work was building the test that I wanted. So putting the name in, then building the test, and then dragging this values field from the columns to the rows. that was the key to making this particular table work. So you might have to practice a couple of times to get that right. There's a few more things to tidy up here. I'm not going to bother with those, but what I am going to do is demonstrate how you might want to use some of these pivot tables for your advantage. You may have a template set up where you can literally, so you've already got the fields that you want. Get rid of that again. All you have to do is copy the data and let's say your template is here. As you can paste those values into your template and then apply things such as, you know, worthwhile change and things like that to this data. So if you want to do a little bit more high level analysis rather than just eyeballing it, you could apply that. You could also overlay team averages and you know, squad targets and things such as that. So the ability to get the data from a pivot table, then paste it into a static report or even a Word document that you can make look nice and pretty. The disadvantage of pivot tables is, generally speaking, they don't look as nice as other types of tables. So we'll just get rid of that. Another thing that's quite interesting, and I haven't shown this before, I didn't show it in my last video, is that you can double click inside a pivot table and it'll create a new sheet and it will explode a whole lot of data that shows you how that particular number was created. So I'm going to do that now. And so what it's done there is create a new sheet with all the test data from that particular test period. So interesting little feature that is built into pivot table is that ability to explode out something just with a double click. Okay, so I'm just going to rename that actually to player pivot 1, and I'm going to do another one. So back to my data set, I'm inside it, I'm going to click insert pivot table, I'm going to put it on a new worksheet, and this time what I'm going to do is create 3 or 4 of these. The overall structure will be the same, name will be in the filter, date will be in the rows, and I'm just going to put like tests together. Body weight, sum of 8. For both of them I want it to be average, and I'll just put the number format on there. The sum of skin folds, I also want it to be average. Certainly one of the difficult things is those number formats. You spend a whole lot of clicks getting everything how you like it. So that's one table, and I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to go back to my data set, insert pivot table. This time I want to choose existing worksheet so that I can tell it I want it exactly, next to my other pivot table. Same setup, choose the name, choose the date, and this time I'm going to put yo-yo distance and MAS in there. Just like before, I'm going to choose average, and a number format. Cool. So that's our second pivot table, and the third one I'm going to do, I'll do probably 2 more actually, I think. Same as before, existing location, put it next to our last table, and drag name down, drag date down, and then put in, I might go to the bottom and put in bench press and box squat. Now if you're like me, you're getting a bit tired of doing all of that, there are some add-ins. pivot power, not to be confused with power pivot, which is a new aspect of Excel, but I'm going to change all to average. And so that's a neat way to save you clicking all the time. Awesome. Didn't change the number formatting, unfortunately. I'm pretty sure you can set that up, but I'm relatively new to using that particular tool, so I haven't cracked into everything yet. Last one, I think I'll do a speed one. Insert pivot table, existing location. Should be getting good at this by now, having done a few of them. I'll just put some speed stuff in. I think I'll do 5 meter and 40 meter. Let's choose something different. Min, number format. Min, number format. Okay, so we're looking all right. We've got our 4 tables now set up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build pivot chart, a slicer and a timeline, and I'm going to put everything on a front page called dashboard. So I'm going to create those pages: player, pivot 2. And player dashboard. Okay, so let's start with the first chart. This is our body weight sum of skin folds. While I'm clicked inside the table, what I want to do is go up to the design, analyze menu, and there is pivot chart as our option. I'm going to choose a combination chart because there are 2 different scales. Sum of skin folds and body weight could possibly work on the same chart. You can see a representation of it above here, and it doesn't look too horrific, but I'm going to put it on a separate axis. I'm going to right click on the chart and choose hide all field buttons on chart. I've now got a 3rd context specific menu appear, and that is because I'm now dealing with a chart and there's a whole bunch of styles you could apply, such as this horrific black one here. I'm not going to do that. I like keeping things white. I just want to put a chart title on there. I'm just going to call it body composition, just to save time. I'm going to put a title on each of the axes. Primary vertical is body weight. And secondary is sum of 8. So if I do that, the chart's looking a little bit better. What I'd probably do, and this is probably what I'll do actually, get rid of the field list. Gives me more landscape to play with. If it was me, I'd be pulling that down, pulling that across so that could sit somehow above it. That's a better looking chart in my opinion, where you can view a bigger area without worrying about those legend values. Not perfect, that chart yet, but it's starting to look a little bit better. Let's do that. Okay, so that's no better at all, but you get the picture. You can muck around just like a normal chart. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just move that down, actually keep it on the same sheet for now. I'm going to repeat that process for all the other 3 charts. So through the magic of editing video, I am going to cut that whole process out for you guys. Okay, now so I'm back. All the charts are made. A couple of them don't look great because for example, the speed one here, you know, it's hard to decide what variables to put on the same chart together, and these two clearly don't really show a hell of a lot when on the same axis. You could put them on different axes to get more of an effect, but that's detail. I'm not going to fuss myself over that at the moment. That's something that you can work out as you play around with things, and there's a whole lot of interesting people who talk about data visualization concepts that you can look up. But for now, I've just got some stuff on a chart, and what I'm really trying to show you is that you can take the next step and link those together with some slices. So I'm going to choose one of my pivot tables, and I'm going to click up on the Analyze menu again, and I'm going to insert a slicer. I'm going to put it on Name, and when that slicer appears, I'm going to connect it to everything on the sheet, which is pivot table 2. So I could name these pivot tables, so I could click on this one and call this instead of pivot table 3, I could call it fitness PT for fitness pivot table, and the other one speed, and so on. But when you're doing those connections, you can kind of see by the sheet name that you're looking at the right thing. So I've never felt it super necessary unless I'm starting to write some code, which is when it's nice to do some descriptive names. The other thing I want to do is inside the slicer tools, which is our current context menu, I want to increase the columns out to probably 4 or 5 so that we can start mucking around with it. I'll also pick a slightly more standout option. Okay, so that's great. One more thing. While I'm inside a pivot table, it doesn't matter which one, I'm going to click on Analyze, and I'm going to insert a timeline. It's only one option because there's only one column of dates, and just like before, I am going to connect this to everything on sheet 2, so everything except the top pivot table. Alright, last task. By holding down the control button, I want to select as many of those things as I can and paste them over here, and I'll go back and get the remaining ones. Cut. Alright, so I'm going to zoom out because that makes it easier to arrange stuff. Fitness profile dashboard. Put a little title. Put my slicer and my timeline up the top. And then build my dashboard underneath. And so this is really just a case of mucking around to get things to look good, and more importantly in many cases to make things print out well if you're going to do that. So you can spend ages mucking around with your charts once you've got it all working and built the way you like it. And so when I zoom back in, it may turn out that I haven't set this up particularly well real estate wise, but nevertheless what I'm trying to demonstrate is that in the space of a relatively short amount of time we were able to build a little interactive dashboard where we can select our athlete, and if we wanted to, select our time zone and just show, let's change that to quarters, or even better, let's just change it to years, keep it really simple. So we can muck around now with our data and zoom in and zoom out of parts that we want to see, look at trends and get some information about what's going on. And so when you've got a bit less information, you can add things like data labels to the speed, which allows you to get some granularity on whether or not things have changed. This is all random data, so you know you'd obviously never get athletes with that kind of variability in their speed time. So what I've done poorly in this case is get the shape and size of things right so it fits on one screen, but nevertheless that's something you can do. I'd tidy up decimal places on the axes and all that kind of thing, but for now what we've got is something that works. What I always do is I turn off the grid lines and I take away the borders on charts, format chart area, that's what I was looking for. Make sure that there's no line, and just do Control Y is just repeating the last action that you have made. So now things tend to fit a bit nicer. You can muck around and check out an athlete profile. You might have some other things like a little radar chart on there, and the same thing is possible just by clicking in these two slices and timeline little wizards. Alright, let's move on. We're into the data again. I'm going to insert one more pivot table and I'm going to do a new worksheet. And basically what I want to do is probably put the entire name list in the rows, and let's just say a couple of particular measures like yo-yo distance, body weight, and mid-thigh pull, for example. And look, I'm not going to go and muck around too much with some of these things, but what I think I'll do is change all to average, which gives me some horrible decimal places. But nevertheless, what it has done just give me a simple table. That's better. And so I can just simply choose a particular data set and quickly get a picture of what's going on. If I wanted to, I could have things sorting a certain way, highest to lowest and so on. But typically, as I demonstrated earlier, what's a really good thing to be able to do with this kind of thing is use a pivot table to get you the data, so you can paste it into a Word document, another Excel template that has particular formats and formulas that allow percentage changes and position averages and all those kinds of things to be calculated and overlaid and so on in a nice way. But basically that is equally appropriate for teams and individuals, that ability to just copy and paste from a pivot table into something else and get your data out of a system very, very easily. Alright, so that's all the pivot table stuff done. What I'm going to have a look at now is some formula-based solutions for exactly the same questions. And so before I do that, I want to demonstrate something else, and that is the advanced filter. So we've got test dates in column C, and I've applied a test label on column D because often that's more informative than a date. You know that it was off season, or you know it was before a major tournament. So I always use a test label, and that's very helpful. So I'm going to select column D, I'm going to click on data and advanced, and there's something called the advanced filter which we're going to use now. It's selected the data that I want, column D1 to D433. I want to copy to another location, unique records only, and I'm going to click inside this copy to. It has to be on the same sheet. It doesn't like doing it to another sheet, so I'm just going to put it here, BI. And so when we go back to where we were, this is a unique list of all the different test sets that we had. So I'm going to put that in the control panel page. And while I've got that all selected, there's two things that I could do here. One of them is format it as a table. The other one is just declare it as a named range. So I'm going to do that. Inside the name box, I'm going to type test labels. As long as you don't use a space, you can type any name you like in there. And so now when I go to start a new page, this is where I can build a team report using a nice little drop-down list. So if I click on the the data tab and choose data validation, I get a series of options, but 99% of the time I'm using list. And what I want to put in that source box is the name that we just created. Now if I've forgotten it, I can hit on a PC F3 and it shows me all the names that I've created. So I'm going to choose test labels. And as simple as that, here is the test labels that I just created. So I'm going to merge that so it's a bit easier to work with. I make things for people all the time, so I've got a little shortcut key that puts that select option in, and one of my customs is to make it gold with a black box around the outside to represent that this is something that you can interact with and select from. So a user can select the test phase that they're looking for. And so there's a few ways we could go about the creation of a report for athletes. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a shortcut in that I'm going to go to the control panel page and I'm going to pick this entire team. I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste values in here. That just saves us a bit of time and saves us having to extract all that information out. And so what we're trying to create is that here's our list of players in column A. Based upon test 4 or whatever selection we've made in cell A5, we can pull out any test data that we like. And we can do that in two ways. We could type up the top here the things that we think are important, such as yo-yo and some of that, or we could have that be more dynamic and so have a drop-down box there. So let's do both. Alright, so what we have to be able to do now is tell Excel exactly what row to look in our database table. If you think about what a pivot table is doing, it's scanning the data and trying to find out all the information that meets our criteria. And so for us, if we're trying to pull out this report, we want to say what is the average, or we might want to say the minimum, but let's say the average because that's easier, yo-yo score for Lizzie Lopez for test 4. And so I mentioned earlier that if we name our table, it's quite easy to write formulas. And so I'm going to demonstrate that now. I'm going to use a formula called average ifs. So we're going to get an average of some numbers if more than one criteria is met. So our average range is TBL data. These are all the column headings that I'm scrolling through. And I'm going to select yo-yo distance. So I'm just using the tab and the arrow keys to select that. My first criteria is that the player name has to equal the name in column A. And so if I use the F4 key, I can put dollar signs around the A or the 9 or both, so that it allows me to drag that formula around a little bit. Alright, criteria 1 sorted. Criteria 2 sorted now, which is that the test label has to match what is in A5. Now that's going to be an absolute cell reference, so I've got a dollar sign in front of both the A and the 5, so that no matter which way I drag that formula, it always locks onto cell A5. Okay, that looks like that's going to work. I can double click on this little square in the bottom right hand corner of the cell, and that will copy down. So I'm just going to scoot that out of the formula window, and I'm going to paste it in next door. I'm going to replace yo-yo distance with sum of 8, and I'm going to double click down. And so that's all pretty easy, and the reason that that's easy, and also relatively easy to understand the formula, I think anyway, is because those column headings and the table name make it easy to read. So if you click inside the formula, you can see the little black highlighted bits. What's criteria 1? What's criteria 2? What's the criteria range? All that kind of stuff is easy to read. We're going to dial it up and make it a little bit harder. This formula here basically has it easy because it just needs to match up the name and the test period. So from the database page, it just has to look column D to match up the label and column E to match up the name. I'm going to make life a little bit more difficult for it now, simply by allowing people to choose any test they like. And so what I'm going to do, we don't want to do anything here, so starting from body weight down, I'm just going to select everything in that table. I'm going to go into the name box and I'm going to call this test options. And so now when I go back to my formula page, I'm just going to choose 3 columns here. Click on data, validation, list, F3, test options. So now I can pick what I want. If I wanted to, I could put a skin fold level. Let's put MAS, speed 20 meters, why not? And one of these counter movement jump options. Expand it out to make it a little bit easier to read, both for us and anyone else looking at the file. Now let's go to work. And now when we did our previous formula, Excel knew where to look for the average, but it doesn't know that now. So we told it where to look because we gave it a column, sum of 8 skin folds in this particular example. But this time here we have to give it some information. So I'm going to do that in a formula to help you understand what's going on. So my table on the control panel page is called TBL field list, and in column 1 of that field list is all the fields, and in column 2 is which column number in the data set it is. So sum of 8 skin folds is 10. So I'm going to use a function called index, which you might have seen me use in the last video. I need to look in the field list, in the column called colNum, and I need to match this value here, which is called MAS, and the first column, which is field list field, and I need an exact match. So if I close that off, it's going to tell us that MAS is in column 27. Let's check that out. So there we are, column 27. So we got that right. And so if I, where am I? Over here. If I drag that across, it's not going to be perfect actually, so I'm just going to paste it. The reason I'm doing this is just because it overcomplicates it if I just drag that. What will happen when you drag is that some of these square bracket field headings will move to the next field, and I don't really want that. So for you guys, I just want you to understand that this column heading is now very helpful to us. So just like before, I'm going to go average ifs, and I'm going to choose the table. Instead of being able to just choose a square bracket and pick my field, I need to be a bit smarter. I need to tell it to look inside just column number 27 to do the average. So you see the double comma there? That means I want all rows, but only just this particular column. So the gap in the middle is the row number. Column 27 is what is indicated by D7 there. So a little bit of a hairy concept, but nevertheless, this is a way you can make everything be quite dynamic. And so now I just have to follow the same thing as before. Criteria 1 is matching the athlete name. Criteria 2 is matching the test label. Excuse me, fat fingers got the best of me. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to get myself into trouble if I don't put a $sign in front of that 7. And before I copy it down, I'm just going to make it a number format. Alright, so if I change that to something else, let's see what happens. RS total. Alright, that updates, so that's awesome. So we now have something working pretty well. And if I copy this across, again, bear with me, I wouldn't do this normally, but I'm just going to paste that in. Paste that in and just click inside the cell to do some editing, and I can see the only thing that's not right is I have to drag that across. So, oops, these cells and the colouring borders is really helpful when you're building formulas. Alright, double click that across. One more thing that I want to do before I stop this video, and that is a little bit like the last video. I'm just going to do a data validation drop down box so you can pick a chart, and because my values are on the same sheet, all I'm going to do is select all 5 of the columns that I've got in place already and make that a drop down list. And drag that down actually so it's in line. And really what I want to be able to do is look up across the top row here, match up the variable that I've selected so we can create a little data series. What that little rows mini formula that I put in place there is just a row counter. If I select that it'll tell us that there's 2 rows there between 8 and 9, and as a consequence, when I drag that down, it updates and pulls in the 4th row and the 5th row. I did explain HLOOKUP a little bit, and I don't want to get bogged down in this video in doing so, because we've already gone quite a long time. But basically what we've got now is a dynamic little series. We can chuck it on any kind of chart that we like. We can tidy up our axes. Looks okay. And we can make it pretty and do all sorts of things to it that allow us to be happy with how it looks. But so now we've basically got a dynamic chart that allows us to visualize on this particular chart anyway, team results for any particular test data set that we like. So we can choose the test set, we can choose the particular set of measures that we're interested in, and we can pick from that list the one that we want to show on the chart. So really dynamic sort of reporting process. Clients that I've done this for in the past, what we've had is a set of tests that are appropriate for a particular position group. Let's say in front row of rugby you've got strength power oriented ones, and another set of tests that are more appropriate for other positions, which are maybe more speed and aerobic fitness oriented, for example. But you know, you tidy it up with a logo and a title and Bob's your uncle. So basically what I've done in this particular case is just focus on the team example for formulas, but I could do an individual formula report as well, where we kind of replicate that wherever we are dashboard process by pulling in just specific measures. Not going to do that. I'm sure you get the picture now, but go away, start mucking around with some of the stuff. Please email me if you want a copy of this file. It will be up on the AUT post-conference website for you to download if you're an attendee, but you may be watching this video long after that has been shut down. So just in case, email me at this address and I will happily send you this file and anything else that you would like. So thanks for watching again, and hope you enjoyed this particular one.